I'm Darren Malibu McBee, and I'm about ready to do an interview with Hannibal TV all the way live. This is D-Mac. Take care.
This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and I'm with a man that's probably best known as Malibu from American Gladiators, but he's also been in Mortal Kombat, Annihilation. He's been in the Batman movies, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Walker, Texas Ranger. The list goes on and on. Married with Children. We might just scratch the surface a little bit in this interview today. Darren McBee, how are you doing today, sir, out in beautiful California?
Man, it is beautiful out here. It's like you said, I got the palm trees. I'm hanging out by my pool, and it's just like a glorious day, my friend. I just think it's kind of funny. Your name and mine are separated by one letter. You're Devin, and I'm Darren. So that's kind of
true. Funny. And you were also a wrestler, too. I forgot to mention that. You spent some time wrestling. I think Rick Bassman got you hooked up in the wrestling business, right?
He did. Actually, Rick Bassman got my wife hooked up as well. They were going to put us over as kind of like a tag team where I was going to be her manager. And then for a little while, I actually went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and wrestled for Grizzly Smith, which was Jake the Snake's father, in 5-star wrestling. And I got the poop kicked out of me doing that. So it was a short-lived career for me, wrestling-wise.
If it was now, when it's very easy for celebrities to make the crossover, you would have been scooped up right away. But back then, there wasn't as much of an easy transition from celebrity to wrestling.
Well, that's true. That's very, very true. Yeah. But, it's funny because I was doing American Gladiators. And so I was kind of at my heyday right then. And everybody knew who Malibu was at the time. So the transition was really pretty easy. And a lot of the wrestlers already knew who I was from the show. So they were really gracious to me. However, they let me know in no uncertain terms that the wrestling game is a tough game for tough guys.
Well, it's too bad you never really got the WWE run, but at the same respect, you did very well as an actor, because it seems like you had all the tools to be a superstar, massive guy, legitimate athlete, obviously, from your American Gladiators athletic displays. You had the look. The ladies loved you. You created a character with Malibu that a lot of people are probably just realizing now was an actual character. So you had all the tools. The stars just weren't aligned, I guess.
Well, it's a couple of things happened because, yeah, you're right. My movie career really took off. I did about 22 national commercials when I was on fire. I was married to a gorgeous woman. We had 2 beautiful kids. And then tragedy struck. She had a massive heart attack at age 35. And instantly I was kind of in a conundrum. It was like, do you want to be, Mr. Superstar actor, wrestler guy, or do you want to be a father and take care of your girls? And I just couldn't stand the thought of my 2 precious daughters being raised by a nanny. So that's where the reason why I pulled back from everything. And I'm really glad I did. It was, it was tough, obviously, but I'm glad I stayed back and took care of my girls.
Yeah, I actually saw an interview with one of your daughters beside you. I forget what it was. I think it may have been ESPN, or it was some big TV company that did a follow-up with you, and one of your daughters was with you, and she looks a lot like you.
Yeah, so it was Kylie, and actually it was a Sports Illustrated kind of Where Are They Now kind of thing. And they came out to interview me and my daughter and my beautiful Great Dane, who's gone on to be with Doggy Heavens, is her little friends. But yeah, it was a really fun interview. And they actually showed the train wreck. You've probably seen it when I got creamed on the human Cannonball platform on American Gladiators. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was watching some of your American Gladiators stuff last night. And not just with you, but with other gladiators. You probably took the worst beating of anyone on the human Cannonball, without a doubt. You needed plastic surgery. But would that even be allowed today with the way the world is today? Something so dangerous?
That's a great question. They obviously modified the games after that little incident. If the fans hadn't seen it, basically this person swung down, and you can pick it up on YouTube, but swung down 25 feet in the air, and I was in a 15-foot pedestal. They swung down on a rope and basically tried to kick me off of a little disc that was about 3 feet around. And this guy donkey kicked me so hard that when I hit the pads, I was fine, but my own knee came over and hit me in the head, and I gave myself a concussion and needed plastic surgery. And so, yeah, anymore these days, I don't think they would play with that because of liability and such.
And it was up to the gladiators to protect themselves from the kick with the little martial arts pad. And more often than not, it seemed like the contenders would actually nail someone directly to the body with one of those feet.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny because, I mean, literally, if somebody just hit you with a stiff breeze going by at that speed, you'd fall off, because they said that if someone hits you straight on, it'd be the same thing as a full dress Harley Davidson hitting you going 5 miles an hour. So you can imagine the power and force of somebody kicking you. I literally, if you look at it and you watch it, I get lifted off my feet by 3 inches before I start going backwards. So it was a shot, man. It rung my bell really well.
And at that time, American Gladiators was getting better ratings than wrestling, from what I understand. Was it a hard tryout process to become a gladiator? I know you were, I think, from the first crop of gladiators.
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, it's funny. It's a funny story. I was sitting on a life cycle spinning, and says, he's looking at trade paper, and he says, "Hey, Darren, they've got tryouts for this show called American Gladiators, and you might be good for it." And so I said, "All right, why not?" You know, I was just starting my acting career, and I didn't know anything about it. So I went down there. We had an obstacle course, which I smoked the obstacle course, and then you had to do a certain amount of sit-ups in a minute and pull-ups. And then the cool part was they took I guess we were auditioning, you know, you'd call it. And they took us into a room, and they auditioned us, and they said, "Okay, so Darren, your name is going to be Domino, and you're a surfer." I go, "Excuse me?" And they go, "Domino." I said, "Domino's a pizza delivery guy." I said, "Why don't you guys call me Malibu?" And they're like, "All right, cool." So I jumped up on a desk, I crossed my legs, and I'm like, "All right, dude, what's up? Talk to me. I'm your man." And I threw that whole surfer spiel, and they fell out laughing. So that's how I booked a job, just right then and there.
Now, we all know about the groupies in the wrestling business. I could imagine American Gladiators probably had them too. Maybe not necessarily with you, but did you notice? I'm sure you had lots of ladies hitting on you, but how was that scene in American Gladiators? Was it like a rock star type scene?
You know, I'll just give you one story, and I swear it's true. A buddy of mine were walking home from this place called the Sagebrush Cantina, and it's a place where all the hot babes from the literal Malibu Beach would go, and they'd have a lot of bikers there. And he and I were walking home, and it was kind of a lone little two-way street, and this girl passes me in a truck, and she was this really smoking hot girl. And she stops and then looks over. She goes, "Oh, you're Malibu." And I go, "Yeah, hey, what's up?" And she goes, "I would do anything to sleep with you." And I started laughing. I said, "Really?" She goes, "I'd do anything." And I said, "Okay, well, get out of your truck, take your clothes off, and crawl across the street naked." And she started doing it. And I'm going, no, forget it, man. I was just kidding. And so I met her at a bar later. We had a couple of drinks. And the funny thing was that at that bar that night, I met my first wife. So it turned out to be quite an evening after all, but I will never forget that as long as I live. That's the power of fame. It's ridiculous. It's just silly, you know. I mean, you were a wrestler, right? I mean, you kind of know what that's all about.
Yeah, I've had a couple issues, but nothing like you. I can imagine being an international superstar. And with your look, I'm hardly the California surfer boy look with the pearly white teeth and the long flowing hair. You had the look of a romance novel guy. Did you ever do any romance novel stuff?
Oh, you know what's so funny about that is you know, of course, Fabio was kind of doing his thing, and so there was always the parody when I'd be walking by. It's like, "Hey, look, it's Fabio," you know, and So I never did it. I started off as a model, and I enjoyed modeling for about 2 minutes. And then I decided I don't like doing this anymore. And I always wanted to kind of be an action actor. I've got a background in martial arts and boxing. So I thought, you know what, I'll make the transition. And really a funny story was all of a sudden when I booked the American Gladiators show, I also booked the Conan show at Universal Studios. So at one point I was literally filming the American Gladiators on the lower lot. Then I'd run up to the upper lot and play Conan for 2,000 people. And that was like living a dream, man. It was wild. So it was just like magic, a super magic time in my life.
You had a few fan questions wanting to know if you ever dated Lace from American Gladiators.
Lace and I actually became really good friends. I remember at first when we met, we kind of had an eye for each other, but she was dating somebody. And then I got married. So after that, she and I just became good friends. But we always kind of had a little thing for each other. But I love that gal. She's really, really, really cool. But no, nothing ever happened.
And was there ever a contender that kind of got under your skin and you wanted to like lay a beating on legitimate in the show?
That's you just served up a softball there, man. This kid named Billy Worth was on, and Billy Worth was one of the kids in a movie called The Lost Boys. You ever see that movie?
Yes.
The vampire movie with Kiefer Sutherland. He was the really long, dark-haired, really good-looking Italian kid. Well, basically what happened was I had just gotten back from having plastic surgery on my head, and there was an event where we would wrestle in this ring, and basically the contender would try and grab the gladiator and throw him out. And I looked at Billy right before we started, and I said, Billy, I've got plastic surgery on my head. I got these stitches. I don't care what you do. Just don't hit me in the face, please. And the first thing he did was palm me right to my forehead and knocked me off my balance and out of the ring. So there was a next event was called the Powerball game. I don't know if you remember that, but guys would be trying to dump the balls in the cylinders, and the gladiators would try and tackle them and stop them. But so me, Gemini, and Nitro got together, and when I told them what happened, they were saying, okay, they're like, so Darren, you hit Billy and drive him off camera, and once we get him out of camera range, we'll take care of him. So here was beautiful Billy with his long hair, his uniform looking good. I took him off camera. When he came back, his hair was like up in the air. His jersey ripped off his body. His nose was bleeding because when we got him off stage, we just beat the snot out of him. So, yeah, that was a very memorable moment, and I'm sure for him too.
And you mentioned Nitro. I guess over the past several decades, some negative stuff has come out about Nitro. Did you get along well with him overall?
Yeah, you know what? Nitro and I came on the show together, and we actually tried out all the new games and tested the new games together. So we actually hung out. I mean, I went to his house and he introduced me to peanut butter and jelly oatmeal, if you can believe that. And so wow. I enjoyed that with him. We had some laughs. But yeah, he and I was fine. But Dan, he's a cocky guy. But he's a great guy, really great guy.
I heard an interview with you saying that American Gladiators once had a show at Madison Square Garden, and I'd never heard that before. Was it normal for you to tour, and what was that like performing in MSG?
Wow, you know what? That was an amazing, amazing time. I guess we had a promoter. He was a rock star promoter, and he had a Gladiator tour, Gladiators Live, that started off in Maine and then hit the venues all the way across America. And one of the venues was Madison Square Garden. And man, I can't even begin to tell you, Devin, how amazing it was. I was down at the bottom of the floor, and you're looking at 20,000 people that are screaming and going crazy. It was amazing. And it was just, I just sat there in awe. And we were all just looking at each other going, wow, this really brought home how popular that show was and how people really just adored the Gladiators. It was amazing. It was just amazing.
Now, when that show started in '89, I know that steroids are legal. I know you're a Christian now. You're very open about the past. Yeah. I think you even wrote a letter to some TV show once on the subject of steroids. It was read on some popular show. But Was that something that was prevalent in American Gladiators, or was what was the deal there?
No, that's a good question. So it's funny you mentioned that, because before we started the tour, we had somebody who was a professional, um, one of those people that prep athletes to know how to answer questions for the the news and such. And they said, when that question comes up, how are you going to deal with that? And I was still a Christian then. I have been since I've been 13 years old. And I said, I'm going to be honest. If they ask me, I'm going to be honest. And of course, it came up, and they asked me about Nitro or Thunder, and I said, listen, I don't know about Nitro and Thunder. I can't speak for them. I don't know what they do privately. So if you got a question for Nitro and Thunder, you talk to them. The reality was that everybody was doing steroids. The girls were doing them. The guys were doing them. I was doing them. I was doing a very minimal amount. Basically, there was a certain type, as you probably know, a certain type of steroid that helps your body heal just quicker. And a lot of that was, I was taking that just so I could recover and go back and do the shows back to back to back. But I never took any of that stuff to get really, really big. So I don't know what the other guys did, but yeah, that's definitely something I did off and on for years.
And I'm sure you probably don't want to encourage people to do them, but obviously we have some bodybuilders that watch this channel, and numerous people ask the question, what was your best cycle? But you don't have to answer that, because I know you don't want to encourage it. But
No, it's okay. I mean, I don't mind being honest. I think I'd stunt doubled Sting for a PlayStation commercial, and I was in the best shape of my life. Now, as you know, I mean, I'm not going to sidestep the question, but as you know, you don't just take steroids and look awesome. You got to eat perfect. You got to train like an animal, or the stuff's not going to work. What I was taking at the time was this stuff called Winstrol V. It was probably the best drug I ever took, and I mixed it with Decadurabolin, both injectables. And that combination just got me hard as a rock and ripped to shreds. And it was an easy, an easy cycle. I never had any liver enzymes that were up. I never had any side effects from them. And today everything is normal. So to me, I think it's like, Devin, it's like anything else. If you're responsible about things and you're in moderation, you're not being crazy. Like, some of these guys are taking so much stuff that, I worry about how they're going to be 10, 15 years down the road. But to me, I was always trying to be as responsible as I could when I took them.
now, throughout your acting career, you've more than often than not had jobs where you have to show off your abs. Do you have any secrets to the six pack?
Oh God. I can honestly tell you that this a lot of six pack just came as a gift from God. I just happen to have really genetically good abs. But the answer to this too. It's really just all diet at some point. It's, staying away from carbs and staying away from sugar. And as long as you're, correcting your diet, you're doing your cardio, I think that's the biggest key right there.
Is it true that you were a Los Angeles sheriff's deputy at one point?
That is true. 1983, I got on the sheriff's department, and I was on for about 8 years. And it was an amazing, amazing journey. Learned a lot.
How is it in your part of LA? I don't know if you live right in the city or if you're out in the suburbs, but we've seen all the videos of all the riots and people getting pulled out of their cars and so forth. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Oh man, it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. I think, boy, you served up another softball there, and that's kind of near and dear to my heart, because I do ministry now, and I work with a lot of young people. And what I see is America's youth is lost. And the biggest problem is that, it's kind of like a fatherless generation. There's just nobody standing up to take care of these kids and teach them, what it is to be a man. And I know what that's like. I know what that's like because my father wasn't around, and I had to stumble through my life and try and figure that out until my late 20s, when I had some really good group of Christian guys that mentored me. But Yeah, it's really crazy out here, and I've got a friend of mine named Dion. You might want to pull him on your show sometime. He's called the Angel of Los Angeles. He's a cop, works at Skid Row. Amazing guy. He was on the podcast with us, that Be Good podcast.
Yes.
Um, he is an amazing guy, man. And what he does, and it's interesting because what you hear on TV is everybody hates the cops. Cops suck, this and that. But down in the grassroots on the floor level, these people are so thankful for the LAPD presence, protecting them and watching over them. It's just a totally different narrative that you hear from when the streets and what the news is saying. And people just buy into everything that's being said in the news as if it's the gospel truth. And I'm here to tell you, man, it's not. They're just feeding stuff that works for their narrative to drive whatever the issue that they want to drive as compared to what's really going on in the streets.
How has crime been throughout your life in LA? I mean, a lot of the time movies portray it as a very dangerous town. I've been there many times over the years for wrestling. I haven't had any issues, but again, I'm not going into all of the areas. But for you, I think you're a lifelong California resident. What's
Yeah.
your experience been?
But the crimes and stuff,
Yes.
um, I'll tell you what. I've lived in the San Fernando Valley, so I've been pretty blessed. But when I was the LA County Sheriff, we worked in Compton and Linwood, which were the black areas where the Crips and the Bloods were. And I actually was assigned to a group called OSS, which is Operation Safe Street. And that was a unit that dealt directly with the Crips gang. So I got a lot of intel. I got to know a lot of those guys. And what breaks my heart more than anything else when I start talking about these issues, and I mean this, is that you've got this group called Black Lives Matter right now, and yet nobody really cared about all the black on black crime that's going on and the stuff that's going on where nobody's going in to help these people and deal with these guys that don't have fathers and try and help these guys that know nothing but gang activity because that's their father figure. Those are the people they have to look up to that protect their back. So to me, I really wish somebody would take a stand, especially in our government, and go help where it needs to be helped the most. And I think that's in our black communities.
And of course, as I mentioned, you've appeared on Walker, Texas Ranger, the famous show that was extremely popular in the 90s. How were those experiences like getting beat up by Chuck Norris in those fight scenes?
You know what? It was really, really cool. Chuck, I met actually Chuck at a Christian crusade that I did because he's also a Christian. I met him backstage at this power team event that I was doing. And I just had the guts enough to go up and say, listen, I'm a big fan. And I gave him a picture and resume. And he was so cool that 3 weeks later, I was guest starring on Walker, Texas Ranger. And after that, he took me up to Spokane. I did a movie with him called The Cutter. In Walker, Texas Ranger, I actually fought, I guess his name is Trevette, the black guy that was assigned.
Yeah.
That guy was terrible. I mean, he hit me right in the mouth when we were doing a fight scene. It was like, dude, settle down. And Chuck, I'll tell a story that nobody knows. Just because it's you, man, I'll tell you, and this is a true story. Chuck and I were doing a fight scene in Spokane. It was just butt cold there. We were both wearing parkas, and he was supposed to get me in a headlock and do like a neck breaker thing on me. And he was usually a really, really gentle fighter. Well, he made this thing look violent, and he actually fractured a vertebrae in my neck. So the C4, I think when I finally had an MRI, they said C4 was partially obliterated, excuse me. So I've never told Chuck, I never told anybody this story, but those things happen, unfortunately. When you play, sometimes you play hard.
I have done a few fight scenes in various movies, nothing as big as the stuff you've been in. But what I was kind of surprised at is it's very physical. Like it's more similar to pro wrestling than a lot of people think.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing, the bumps you take in pro wrestling and the bumps you got to take when you're throwing fights. And I think, the thing is, if a stuntman's fighting a stuntman, you're usually pretty safe. But imagine you're a pro wrestler and you're skilled at what you do. Then all of a sudden, a guy who's an MMA fighter comes in and is supposed to do a fight scene with you. Well,
Yeah.
that guy doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know about distancing. He doesn't know about pulling punches. I was in Russia, and a guy named Oleg Tuktarov.
Yes.
He
Yeah.
was there. So I did a movie with him, and Oleg was another headlock scene. He was supposed to be hitting me in the head with a pistol. Oleg was really hitting me in the head with a pistol. It
Wow.
was 20 degrees below zero. And then you can hear that thing ringing, the sound for half a block. And I'm going, Oleg, knock it off. I said, you're busting my head open. And, as bad as I wanted to kick his ass, I couldn't because he was the Russian bear. He would have destroyed me. So, it happens. You know what I mean? It gets to be real out there sometimes.
I think the only difference really between acting, fight scenes, and wrestling is they try and mitigate the risks a little bit better overall in acting than they do in wrestling.
That's really true. I mean, like I said, I had a very small stint in wrestling, and within 2 matches, I separated my A joint in my shoulder, I broke a thumb, and I got a concussion. I mean, I couldn't believe how tough that was.
Now, as far as Married with Children, you appeared a couple of times at least on that show. I saw the one where you were the stripper police officer. What were those experiences like?
That was actually my first acting job I ever did. And what was cool was I was a personal trainer then, and I was training this gal named Sharon. And Sharon one day just said, "So what are you doing with yourself?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get into be an actor." She goes, "Well, my husband is Gordon Levitt, who is the executive producer of this show called Married with Children." And I'm going, "Oh, I love that show." So she said, "Well, let me see if I can get you an audition." So a week later, I was auditioning, and then I booked that police job. And that was literally the first acting job I ever did in my life. And they treated me so well on that set. I mean, they knew I was green. They knew I was nervous. And they were just really awesome. And that show is played so many times. It's unbelievable. So yeah, it was. I'm really proud of that and thankful that it was a fun show like that for my kickoff acting career.
There was a fan question that wanted to know if Peggy or Kelly is hotter in real life.
I'd have to go with Peggy, but back then, man, she was. Kelly was still young, so she didn't really do anything for me. But Peggy, Katie Seagal, smoking hot and sexy. That no question about it. I mean, now Kelly, as time went on, got to be quite the babe, but I'd say Katie Seagal hands down.
My favorite character from that show was Jefferson. Did you run into him at all on the set?
What's that?
Jefferson, did you run into him at all on the set? The guy that.
Oh yeah. No, I never did. Was Jefferson Ted McGinley, or is that the other guy? I can't remember. Yeah.
It was the neighbor, the neighbor that was always getting Al into trouble.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I never met him, and I actually never got to meet Al either, Al Bundy. So it was kind of a bummer.
And as far as the Curb Your Enthusiasm appearance, that show is blown up to be a huge hit. And it seems like your episode is one of the episodes that are played the most. I watched it on an airplane once, but I also saw it on TV. What was that experience like?
Another magic moment for me. One of the gifts I believe God has given me is I'm good at improv, and as a wrestler, that's a good gift to have. So they called me in an audition, and basically the character was supposed to get in an argument with the lead character, David. So anyways, they wanted me to cuss him out. "Oh, you dirty mother, blah, blah, blah." And I'm thinking, okay, I've got 2 little girls at home. And if I was going to yell at somebody, what would you say when you don't want your daughter to hear you using the F word? You use other silly words. And I went off on a 45-second tangent of, I'll body slam you so hard you'll poop your bald pants. And, it was just ridiculous stuff that was coming out of my mouth. And it ended up winning an award for being like one of the #1 funniest episodes ever. So, and the cool thing, I remember one more thing that was really funny is 3 different times when I was going into my little spiel, Larry David broke. I mean, he started laughing, and I was laughing along with him. And then the first assistant director came up to me. He said, "Darren, you don't understand." I go, "What?" He goes, "Nobody has ever made him laugh on set. Nobody. Because you're the first person to ever make him laugh, and not only once, 3 times." So I know I did my job when that happened.
One of the fans wanted to know, you mentioned, of course, that was off the cuff, but how much of the other scenes were off the cuff?
The interesting thing about that show, and it's pretty much all improv. Basically, what they'll do is they say, "This is the storyline, okay? And from beginning to end, you want to start off here." Like, for instance, my scene. You're going to start off in a car. Your kids are playing cowboys and Indians with him. And then one of your kids says to you, "Dad, he's shooting a gun at us," and you just rip the end, you get out of the car and tell him off. So they give you that scenario, and then you go, and it's all improv from there. So every episode is like that. And I think that's the brilliance of that show, is because the actors are all given an idea of what the scene is about, and then they just go. And so wherever the dialogue takes them is where they end up.
Now, for your appearance in Mortal Kombat Annihilation, you played Motaro. I'm not a big Mortal Kombat fan, but you had numerous fan questions about this character. Obviously, it's an iconic character for Mortal Kombat fans. Were you a fan of the video game prior to your audition?
You want the truth?
Sure.
No, not really. I mean, I've heard about it, but I'm not one of those guys like you. Okay. We are doers. Okay. You and I go do things. We wrestle, but I'm technically I'm a spaz. I mean, I'm really, really challenged when it comes to anything video games and stuff like that. So I never really played. I love watching people play the games. Like my wife would be into it, or my daughters, and I'd watch them fascinated. But when I got a chance to audition, I had heard that Motaro was like one of the toughest characters to beat in the game. That's what I knew. So to be able to book that job is probably the greatest accomplishment I've had as an actor. I had to go through 5 different auditions, and they were actually going to try me out for Shao Kahn, which they did a much better job of casting with Brian Thompson. But I really, really enjoyed playing that character. I was really thankful to get it. I was traveling all over the world, being taken care of by the people in production. So it was just a real blessing.
Now, your makeup for that character was very extensive. What was a typical day in makeup for that?
Yeah. So every day I'd be up at about 4:30 in the morning, and they would literally prop up 2 like sticks underneath my arm, crutches basically underneath my arms, and they would start painting my makeup on the scales of the character, and then they'd put these horns on my head that were like spring-loaded horns, so they were really tight, and they gave me a massive headache every single day. I mean, wearing those horns was a nightmare. I had to keep pulling them off my head just to get a break. But anyways, those were on, and then they used these prosthetic like elbow spikes and on each elbow, and prosthetic teeth and such. And the pants was like the legs were just like a rubber, almost like a Batman suit that you put on, that had the spikes on the knees and such, etc. So it was uncomfortable in the sense that for 18 hours, I couldn't lean up against anything. I couldn't touch anything, or the makeup would come off everywhere. So I was literally having to either stand still or sit down and not move anywhere. It was a challenge, but it was a great challenge.
And were they purposely trying to hide your nipples in that? A lot of fans wanted to know, because you didn't appear to have any nipples as that character.
That's a first, man. I've never heard of that before.
That would many people ask that question.
That's hilarious. You know what? That's so funny because I worked on the last two Batman films that Joel Schumacher did. The one where he put the bat nipples on it.
Yeah.
So I think that's particularly funny. As far as I know, they weren't trying to get rid of the nipples, my nipples. If they did, they were doing it when I wasn't paying attention. So that's the best answer I can give you on that one. That's funny, though.
You had a famous line in the movie, "Too bad you will die." Did you expect that to be one of the iconic lines of the film?
You know what? I think my favorite line. I didn't expect that to be one of the lines, but to me, I was talking. My favorite line was I was talking to Shiva, and one of the other generals, and I said, your hollowed position atop the worm pile appears to be most tenuous. Now your failure will be my victory. I remember that, and I love that line. That was like my favorite line.
And a fan wanted to know if Raiden or Shao Kahn or anyone pulled any ribs behind the scenes during the filming.
Brian Thompson and I were good friends because he actually worked with me at Conan. So he and I kind of traveled everywhere together, and more than anything else, we were just cutting up with each other because some of the other actors were just a little too serious. They weren't having fun. And to me, I'm all about having fun. You know what I mean? For crying out loud, it's Mortal Kombat and it's not brain surgery. So I wanted to make the character the most fun, exciting, but also vicious character. But yeah, I think Brian and I were teasing each other a little bit, but nothing too crazy.
Would that have been one of your highest paying Hollywood jobs that you ever had?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, commercials. Believe it or not, commercials can pay a lot of money if you do a national or an international. But by that, because of the residuals that came with it, yeah. I mean, when I opened my my mailbox and found my first residual check, I was stunned. So yeah, I did really well in that movie.
Yeah, from what I understand, I haven't seen it. I might see it now that I've been researching you. I'm kind of interested, but it wasn't a critical hit. But from what I understand, it was a big commercial hit.
It opened up number one in the box office and then went in the toilet quickly thereafter. And I'll tell you why it did. It was a $70 million budget movie. And when I read the script just kicked major butt. It was awesome. It was fast moving. The characters were developed really well. The problem was the director was a first time director who was given a budget of $70 million, and he shot out most of the budget so that when it got to the end, which was the most epic fight scenes, my character lost about 10 minutes of screen time, and all the really bitchin' fight scenes was between Jax and Motaro. I was supposed to be knocking pillars down with my tail and all these crazy things. But also the storyline was taken away, like character development was taken away. So unfortunately, what could have been a majorly awesome movie didn't make a lot of sense, and I can see why the fans were disappointed.
And another question from the fans is, have you heard any rumblings about a future Mortal Kombat movie now that special effects have grown again, and it probably could be done a lot better now, possibly with you reprising a role?
I can answer that question, and I think it's a great question because when I did that, I mean, I remember having the computer-generated graphic animation artist tell me that he said, you watch 10, 15 years from now, they're going to do things that we can't touch, which one of them was I wanted to leave my hair down because I thought Motaro should have had long, crazy hair, flying all over the place, and it would have made the character more vicious looking. But because the animation hadn't developed to that stage yet, they had to put my hair back because now you can see individual strands of hair. I mean, you can take a picture of an actor and make a whole movie out of the guy, and age people right before your very eyes. So, yeah, it would be amazing if they did a remake. And yes, I've heard in the wind that they're going to do another one. And no, I don't think they're going to bring me back.
Well, you're one of the lucky ones that are blessed to have the same hair All these years later, you haven't lost any of your hair. I can't say the same.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
mentioned,
yeah. I mean, it's not quite as thick, but thankfully it's still there. You know. But yeah, that's funny. I mean, people say that a lot, and it is a big deal as an actor, especially. That's a big deal.
oh yeah, it definitely is. Now, for the Batman movies that you mentioned, I think you were in the one with Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones, and
Correct.
you said you were in two actually. Could you tell us about your experiences in the Batman films?
Yeah. So I actually was really, really fortunate. There was a movie before that called Falling Down with Michael Douglas. That was a Joel Schumacher movie. Joel brought me in and auditioned me for a role in Falling Down. And it was a really, really great scene. At the end of the movie, I think it was Robert Duvall was running down the beach. And what the scene was supposed to be, he was going to run into a commercial that was being filmed. And I was holding up a Suzuki car, and there were these four beautiful babes standing around me, and I had these lines like, "What are you doing, man? You're interrupting my scene," and blah blah blah. And he goes taking off, and of course that scene got ended up on the editing room floor. And so if you watch the movie, all you see is Mia at the end of a pier in a blazing pink Speedo standing there, and it was like embarrassing because I told everybody I'm in this movie, I got this great scene, and that was it. That's all I ended up. So the good news is I still get residuals. So, but from there, what was cool is Joel actually hired me for the next two Batman movies. And I had worked with Jim Carrey before on In Living Color, and he's just out of his mind. That guy. I mean, I think he's certifiable now, really, but just amazingly talented, truly. And he's made of rubber. I mean, this guy's body can do the most weird things. He dislocates his joints, and very, very, very interesting guy. Tommy Lee Jones was, I hate to say it, but he was really a drag. Very, very full of himself. Didn't want to talk to anybody. I was his main bodyguard in the movie for weeks. And I remember he was walking up to me talking to his agent, and my grandmother was a huge fan of his. And I stopped and I said, "Hey, listen, I've had a great time working with you, Mr. Jones." I said, "Would you mind giving me an autograph for my grandmother?" And he looked at me right in the eyes, looked me up and down, curled his lip and walked away, and just blew me off. And I thought, what a turd. You know what I mean? And that was him. So that was probably the only downer about the movie. But fighting Val Kilmer was a lot of fun. They gave me my own close-up scene. Joel gave me my own close-up scene in the beginning of the movie. So it was just a blast. Everybody I know, all my stuntman friends had a great time on that.
Is there anyone else that you've worked with in Hollywood that has been a bit of a diva like that, as you're explaining about Jones? I'm sure there's lots, but anyone that really stands out?
You know what's funny is usually it's not the bigger name actors. Usually it's the wannabe actors, the guys that think they're something, but they're not, and they're not going anywhere. Those are the guys used to crack me up because they would, they get so method about stuff, and they would get all into their scenes and just be jerks afterwards because they were still in the moment, as they would say. And I'm like, dude, get out of here. You know what I mean? It's like, they take themselves way too seriously. So I think the reason why you find that in the business, honestly, Devin, is that acting attracts the most insecure people. And a lot of times people become actors because they want to be validated. They want people to give them accolades to make them feel good about themselves, sadly. But that's the reality of it. I mean, of course, there's a lot of actors that aren't, but I would say a great number of the actors are very insecure. And that's why you get these people with attitudes.
And you mentioned In Living Color. I remember that show. What were you doing as part of that show?
Yeah, so Jim Carrey played a character I think it was called Vera Cosa. She was like a barbarian queen. I mean, it was hilarious. I mean, so ugly. You can imagine Jim Carrey playing a woman. He had pigtails and this little strip of leather that covered his nipples. And so I was one of the barbarians that would fight against him. And then I did another skit where he played Rocky Balboa. and I was his corner man in that. And he was hilarious in both of those things. So I had two really great experiences both times working there.
Wasn't J-Lo also on that show?
Yep, she was one of the Fly Girls, one of the original Fly Girls. Yeah, she was
So
one of the, they had the dancers, and yeah, she was one of the first ones.
So you would have seen her in her prime years as a physique wise and look wise. Wow.
Yeah, she was amazing. Yeah, she was, and also, oh shoot, I can't think of the other one. There was another one that's really famous. That she was one of the panel judges on Idol, American Idol. What was her name? Paula Abdul. She was awesome.
Yeah.
Paula
She's
Abdul.
underrated too as a singer. She was pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So a couple of girls had a good launch from that show.
Now, I was surprised about this. I actually watched the video online, but there's a huge cult following for your Dragon Strike video.
Oh my gosh.
Which is like a VHS for a board game. And like, there's people that are obsessed with this. I searched it. There was one guy that said he's 40 now and he's watched it once a month since he was 10.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So you play a warrior in this. I actually watched it last night to see what all the hype was about it. It is pretty cool. You might want to smoke something if you're out there watching that before. But what was your experience like filming that? And are you surprised people are still talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first I heard somebody watching that much, but I knew the board game was popular. What was so cool about that is it's hard to tell, but the fight scenes that we had were actually really, really good fight scenes, because all the guys that I worked with at Universal Studios doing the Conan show, almost every one of them was in that video. So it was a really cool job that I booked, because I was in my honeymoon in Maui, and one of the guys called me up and said, "Do you want to be in this Dragon Strike thing, or audition for this Dragon Strike thing?" I said, "Heck yeah." So I left my honeymoon and went down there and auditioned. I booked this job, and I worked with all the guys I knew really well. The set was just probably one of the most magical, fun sets ever. And we actually did a follow-up to that called Wild Space, and they updated everybody's outfits, and the outfits were like really bitchin'. And we had a TV series that was going to go. And you can imagine back then, I mean, the CGI compared to now stunk, but the concept was really cool. It was like live action in a cartoon. So, so anyways, we were going to get this show going. We getting excited, but the people that owned the merchandising and the people that had the rights to the television were arguing back and forth. So the thing went down the toilet, all because of greed.
How long did it take to film that, the original one?
I'm going to say about a month. Because it was interesting, because everything was shot. Nothing was like a practical in the set. Everything was like, blue, painted blue. And we had to say, oh, that's a chair, that's a ship, and so we had to really use our imaginations when we were flying around, so that at the end of the day, what we saw was really cool, because that was kind of like state of the art for back then. So yeah, it was really, really fun.
You were fighting animated characters at certain points in that too, which has to be a bit of a challenge, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I was fighting air. It was one scene where this character is throwing fireballs at me, and I'm like swatting them out with like baseballs with my sword. And that's a weird thing in your mind, because you've got to imagine things coming at you and you're swinging at nothing. But when they animated the fire and the flames hitting my sword, it turned out to be pretty cool.
Now, you were on Baywatch Nights, which I remember watching back when it aired, and it was actually my grandmother's favorite show. Really? At the time. It seemed to be gaining steam, but unfortunately was canceled. But any memories of that and working with David Hasselhoff?
He's just a real gentleman. He and I have kind of been buddies ever since then, because Alex Daniels is his main stunt guy, and Alex is a friend of mine. We worked on Batman. He was in the Conan show. So through Alex, I kind of got to know David, and David's been nothing but a gentleman to me. We had fun. Of course, he beat me up on the show, but or what I can remember, he did. And I think he threw me over a pool table. I don't know. but yeah, we had a good time, and we've always been friendly every time I've ran across him, wherever.
What's he doing these days? I haven't heard much
What's
from
that?
David. What's David Hasselhoff doing these days? Is he still filming stuff, or is he scaled back?
Yeah, as far as I know, he's not doing a whole bunch. He kind of got quiet. I know he's having a bit of an issue fighting alcohol problems, and so I know that was an issue. I think he overcame that, but that was kind of a problem for him for a bit, which is a lot of people in that industry, unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of people in any entertainment industry, unfortunately.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Now now I'm at the fan question. I mentioned this earlier, but I guess it was Joe Bob Briggs's Monster Vision that you had written the letter to.
Where are you finding this stuff?
Your fans wanted to know about this, and apparently you mentioned Roddy Piper in this, that he had used steroids or something for They Live. Were you in They Live?
No. Roddy and I, Roddy is truly one of the most lovely people I've ever worked with. I mean, we did this movie called Immortal Kombat together, and it's really worth watching. For a B film, it's really fun. It's got Sonny J.J. Chiba, who's one of the greatest sword masters in Japan, and the sword fighting scenes are brilliant. Tiny Lister's in it, big Tiny Lister.
Oh yeah, I've interviewed him. Yeah.
Okay, great guy, man, great guy. So Tiny and I became friends and hung out. But what was so cool about Roddy is he and I had a couple fight scenes, and he just let me have fun, man. He let me throw him through a chicken coop. There was one scene where my character was supposed to get in his face, and I said, Roddy, will you let me put you over? I want my character to spit in your face and then lick it off of you. And he's going, cool, man. And I'm like, who would do that? Who would let another guy spit in his face? But he's a wrestler, so that's kind of the gags that they're used to doing. But yeah, he's tough as nails and a real gentleman. He's a real family man. Loved his family. I was so sorry to hear when he passed away. But I worked with him a couple times, and just a really super cool guy.
So what was that letter all about? What possessed you to write this letter into this Monster Vision?
Oh, okay. So that's so funny, because Joe, I happen to be watching late at night. Okay. Because I watch, you're up and you're watching these silly movies, and I love that stuff anyways. So here he gets on and he starts bagging on me, and he starts saying, oh, here's this guy in this movie. He obviously has butt cheek implants, and he's on steroids. And I'm laughing at myself going, oh yeah, butt cheek implants. Right.
Yeah.
So I wrote him this long letter saying, Joe Bob Briggs, I happen to work out, 12 hours a day, and I eat really good. And I said, so, steroids is not even is a moot point, but I promise you with all my heart, I don't have any butt implants, and you can come see it for yourself. And so it was a goof. I was just goofing him back. There's nothing serious about it. And he howled. I got another letter back from him, and that was the end of it. But I couldn't let him get away with that when I watched myself on TV,
And for your sword work, you mentioned in a lot of movies you were using swords. Did you undergo much training over the years for that?
Did I ever what?
For all of your swordsmanship, did you undergo a lot of professional training to be able to do all those scenes with swords?
The best training I got was a swordmaster guy named J.R. Beardsley. He was the guy who first coordinated the Conan show, and he taught me a ton. And then the second guy that came in was a guy named Anthony DeLongis. And Anthony's a really big name in stunts and stuff. And he was the one who took over the show after JR left. And Anthony taught me a ton of stuff. And then actually when I was down in Mexico doing Immortal Kombat, there was a sword master there, a real legitimate samurai sword master who showed me a lot of really cool stuff when I was there. So I legitimately am pretty decent with a sword.
Do you keep a collection at all in your house in case you have any intruders?
Make sushi out of them.
And you had a fan question that wanted to know, you worked alongside Mike O'Leis and you played the role of O'Herm or something. And he wanted to know your opinion of working with Mike O'Leis.
Mike, who's that? I'm kind of lost. I don't know the name of the movie, and I don't recognize that name.
Okay. It's a fan question, so I won't go into it, but you had another fan question who said he was a huge fan of the movie The Killing Zone and wanted to know
Yeah.
if you have any stories about The Killing Zone.
Oh yeah, you know what? That was my first movie I ever did, and my first, I guess, starring role in a B film, and it was a blast. The guy made me look like a superhero in that movie, and I was in really great shape for that. I had so much fun. I actually met my very first real love of my life, who was my co-star, which is so cliche, Devin, but that's what happened. I fell in love with her the second night I met her, and so we stayed together for another year and a half after that. But we still are friends to this day. So I think that was a cool story. And the other story was one day I was on the set and I was doing a fight scene and I ripped the butt right out of the back of my pants. And so unfortunately, they didn't have a stunt pair of pants for me. So I had to borrow somebody else's pants. And they were like floods, man. They're like 6 inches way too short. So they tried to shoot me from, the calf up. So those are probably the two funniest stories I could think of on the set.
And you worked with Anna Nicole Smith as well in your career. I think it was called Skyscraper. What was she like?
Correct. She was probably more than half the time she was so stoned she couldn't even remember her lines. It was really, really sad. I remember her little boy who was very androgynous looking. I mean, literally he had like just bleached blonde hair, cut off like a Prince Valiant. He had 3 earrings in one ear, 3 earrings in another. You couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl. And I remember watching, right up and down the hallways on his little big wheel. And her, she's so wasted, she literally could not say her lines. There was a scene where, in the scene where I was supposed to slap her around, and she said she really wanted me to hit her. And I said, Anna Nicole, if I really hit you, I'd take your head off. She goes, well, I want it to look real. I said, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, what I'll do is I'll swipe close to your face, just turn your head. It's going to look fantastic. Well, that turned out to be a 25-minute discussion / argument where the stunt coordinator had to come over and convince her that, Darren knew what he was doing and he's not going to hit her. But that's just kind of showed where her head was at. It was kind of sad, honestly. And the other thing was, that movie, if it was done correctly, was supposed to be like a Die Hard for a gal. It was a breakout movie. The script was really cool, even though it was a B film. She could have really made something out of it if she wasn't in such bad shape on the set.
And you were in the Monster Wars as the Equalizer. We had a fan that wanted to know your thoughts on that role.
My goodness. Wow. Yeah, had a ball. That's another, I've had about 4 TV series that should have gone to series, and for one reason or another, that didn't happen. Of course, American Gladiators did, but that one Dragon Strike was supposed to be a TV series. It didn't happen. This is another one, a great concept. You had these awesome monster trucks, and then you had these larger than life characters, and they were going to, put them with the, games and toys and all that stuff. And for some reason, it just didn't happen. But I had a blast doing it. I mean, I loved everybody I got a chance to work with, and it was a lot of fun.
And you appeared in a movie or two with Elvira, the legendary actress. What was she like to work with?
Oh, she was gorgeous, man. She's one of the sexiest women ever. Okay, so I will tell you a story about that, which is worth telling. They put out in the trade papers, they had a blurb that said, looking for exotic dancers, really good exotic dancers. And I used to be a Chippendale dancer way back in the day. So I thought they're looking for Chippendale type guys. Well, what they meant was they were looking for different looking guys that were professional dancers. I mean, ballet dancers. pro dancers. I mean, like the ones that could do 15 spins. And so I get out there and there was 150 of us. And the choreographer says, you got to do this little routine. And then everybody follows it. Well, everybody's doing this perfectly. And I'm so bad. I'm laughing at myself. I suck. I mean, by far the worst dancer out there. And so they whittle down by 25 people and I'm still there. And I'm going, surely at 6'4", they have to have seen me. Maybe they didn't. So she do another routine, make it a little more difficult. I'm worse than before, laughing so hard I'm crying. And they cut it down to 20 people. And I'm going, how in the heck am I standing here still? Got down to 5 people and they finally bring me up to the front. And I said, why? You know, and they're laughing, saying, you know what? You were having so much fun. Of course you sucked, but you were having so much fun. We have to put you in this movie. And that's how I booked that job. Just laughing. Yeah. So that was a fun story. I mean, you know, it pays to not take yourself seriously, Devin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Too many people take themselves seriously, and I'm not that guy. I've learned to laugh at myself, and it's fun doing it.
You also appeared in the Roswell TV series. Any thoughts on that? It became a big hit.
I just remember the crew being really, really nice. I don't remember a lot about the role. I thought it was a neat show. Personally, I thought the concept was good. But I don't, honestly, I can't remember a lot about it. It was a quick in and out.
Now, on that subject, we do cover the UFO subject on this channel as well. We've seen the Pentagon recently release some videos of unidentified aircraft and basically saying they don't know what they are. What are your thoughts on that whole subject?
I think that's a really fascinating subject. I think there's something out there, but I don't think it's what people believe it is. Being a Christian, and it's probably going to get a lot of people throwing tomatoes at me, but I believe there's a lot of demonic deception out there. I believe that, you know, in the end times, you know, the Bible says people are going to be deceived, and there's a lot of deception. So the Bible says that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. And so to me, if anybody can bend light and make weird things look like they're happening, I believe it's him. But if you want to get onto astrophysiology and you want to get into quantum mechanics, it's been proven that it's literally impossible for any craft going the speed of light to maintain any sort of life at all, because it would implode on itself. Because when time stops, mass shrinks. And so it's been proven beyond shadow of a doubt that nothing could go the speed of light. So that's why I do not believe personally that UFOs exist. However, I do believe people have honestly believe they've been, taken away or examined or whatever. I don't doubt that, but I think it's demonic activity.
And you're not the first person that I've heard talk about that type of stuff as well. There was a few fans that had this question back when the Ultimate Warrior was big and he wore makeup. You had similar hair, similar build. Did people ever confuse you for the Ultimate Warrior when you were walking around?
No, you know, it's funny. They used to think I was Kevin Nash, and I laughed because he's about a foot taller than me. But I look more like him. Ultimate Warrior was my favorite wrestler, man. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I got in American Gladiators. When I saw him do his shtick, I go, man, I want to be like that guy. So, I mean, that's the honest truth. I got to meet him once backstage at a wrestling event when he wrestled Randy Macho Man Savage. And it was kind of like a highlight of my life and fun. But I don't think I've ever been mistaken for him. It was usually Kevin Nash. But I have stunt doubled Triple H in a WrestleMania commercial. I did a horse fall for him. The very first commercial I ever did, I was stunt doubling Hulk Hogan, if you can believe that. I look nothing like Hulk Hogan. It was a driving commercial. And my most favorite commercials, for PlayStation, I stunt doubled Sting, which was amazing. It was the best commercial I've ever done. So I've actually become good friends with Steve over the years.
Of course, you guys have the connection. You both were set up for wrestling training by Bassman too. Now, Sting was part of that the anti-bullying or speaking out. Or Be Tough. It's called Be Tough, that Rick Bassman let me play on this channel last week. What are your thoughts on Sting and that side of him, the Christian side, and the positive message that him and you guys were trying to send last week out to the world?
I think Steve is a class act. I mean, I think he is in a business, and you know this, you're in a business, how difficult it is. I mean, he's got women throwing themselves at you, drugs throwing themselves at you. There's so much temptation out there. And he will righteously say he fell in the beginning of his career many, many times to drugs and alcohol, to his credit. I think it takes a lot of guts to do that. But by the same token, he admits that that the only thing that changed his life was God, and it changed his life big time. And he literally is one of these guys that practices what he preaches. He's not a, fly by night person who likes to say a nice little spiel and lives like the devil on his days off. So Rick and I actually came up, Rick and I usually came up with this Be Good idea. And I think in this day and age, there's just so much chaos and so much brokenness in our culture and our country, that a simple message of just being good is going to resonate with a lot of people. And if you get a bunch of America's, toughest guys, or what people would think is a tough guy, and they're being basically tender warriors and talking about the importance of, being kind, being good, treating people with respect, it's going to resonate with a lot of hearts.
Now, speaking of tough guys, you've played a lot of tough guy roles, and of course, you're in American Gladiators. Did anyone ever give you trouble when you're just out on your daily activities? Because a lot of times people love to challenge the guys with the tough guy reputations.
Yes, I can say probably 10, 15 times where I would be out, minding my own business, and I've had guys literally come up to me and, pardon my French, but they would say, "You're an asshole," and I would say, "Really?" "Yeah, I could kick your ass." And I'm going, and the way I ended every potential fight was say, "You know what? You're right. I'm an actor. I couldn't fight my way out of a wet paper bag. You probably could kick my ass. So let's just say we went outside. You beat the crap out of me, and I'm buying you a beer now, and you can tell everybody you beat my ass." And they'd always laugh and shake my hand. I'd buy them a drink, and that'd be the end of it. So I literally talked my way out of every single fight I could possibly get into.
Because especially being a star, if you're actually getting in those altercations, even if you win, there's a high likelihood they're going to try and sue you. Nothing good is going to come out of the situation.
Yeah. I mean, and to me, if I'm going to fight and hurt somebody. I'm not going to fight and play around. And I'm not going to wait to take the first shot. I'm going to take the first swing, and I'm going to knock them out, and I'll fight dirty. But to me, because I am a Christian, I have these values. I always think the best way to do it is just talk your way out of it, humble yourself. And you're right. I mean, there's no winning a fight. Nobody wins a fight. It's stupid.
Now, as far as your best lifts, there's a couple of fans that wanted to know your best bench press, deadlift, squat over the years.
I'm compared to a lot of guys, I'm not very strong. My best bench was 405 for 2 reps. I used to be able to squat like 315 for like 10, 15 reps. I never did a real heavy squat because I was too afraid to blow my knees or my back out. I've got a really, really bad back already. I broke it years ago when I was in the police department, and that's one of the reasons why I left. So I got to be really careful about that. And I never ever deadlifted, just again because of my back. So my as far as like pulling, like a pull down, or I could pull the stack on doing back exercises. My back is really strong that way. But the best I did was 405 for 2, which is respectable, but it's nothing compared to some of these guys that I know.
And speaking of injuries, I saw an interview you did where you actually were filming, I believe, some type of acting scene, and you caught somebody that was falling from a large distance, and you ended up getting severely injured. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, I mean, of all things, okay, who could get hurt working in an opera? I was hired to do an opera with this star named Placido Domingo, and it was called The Golden Girl of the West. It was basically a Western theme. And so they thought they would intersperse with the chorus of guys, real stuntmen. and have a real bar fight, which was a great idea. And so one of the scenes was the guy would be the typical fall off the balcony and 4 guys would catch him and then the fight would resume. So this one stunt guy would do the same thing. All he would do is he'd get his heels up to the balcony and fall straight back. And we would catch him. Well, if you take one step, your trajectory is going to throw you 10 feet further than you know this, right? So I don't know why he got all geeked up for some reason and he took a step back and he was flying and his head was going straight for the pavement. He would have probably killed himself or broke his neck. So I basically stepped out and I caught his upper body with my body. And then my my buddy Gary Casper caught his legs, which took about 20% of his weight away from me. But the shock of his body hitting me with such force herniated 6 discs in my back. And so I was wrecked. I couldn't work for 6 months after that.
Did they stop the opera at that point? Because obviously I don't think you would have jumped back up after that.
No, strangely enough, and you know how this goes too, okay? I know I'm preaching to the choir. Sometimes when you get injured, you got so much adrenaline going that you just keep going. And I've had that happen many times. I've been injured several times and still kept going and then would pass out afterwards or something. So yeah, I just kept going to the end of the show and then we went to the hospital after that.
And just a few more questions here. Some of the fans wanted to know your opinion on today's wrestling. Obviously, it's not at one of its high points. Do you still watch it at all? And what are your thoughts on maybe how it could become popular again?
You know, I really loved it in its heyday when you know, the Hulk Hogan's and the Randy Savages and the Ultimate Warriors were doing. What I liked about it is you had your distinctly good characters and your distinctly bad characters. Now it's like everybody blends into what? And you don't have a distinctly good or bad. It's like the bad guys are good and the good guys are bad. And I think that takes away some of, you know, the luster of wrestling. And I think there's just too much TNA in there. I mean, I love the girls when they wrestle. I think that's great. I think it's good when they're sexy. But when they start getting too sexualized, that's not what wrestling should be, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think it's positive for the kids to look at that. And I think it takes away from wrestling in general. So that would be my only suggestion is just go back to the basics. You know, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Now, as someone that had a kayfabe character, the Malibu character, now we see WWE themselves, they're constantly admitting that it's a performance and the matches are planned and wrestlers don't kayfabe at all on social media. Do you think there should be more protection, or do you think it should just go the way of acting where they just present it as pure acting and it's filmed in scenes now, even in some cases?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Like I said, I like it in its purest form when those guys were those characters and that you had that mystique of, you know, is he really like that? Does he really believe that stuff? It's a suspension of disbelief, it's called, where you look at these guys and you can't, kids love to pretend they're those guys, you know, they want to pretend they're Superman, even though there's not a Superman. So I think that when you stick to wrestling as purist and let the guys be who they're pretending to be and live their personas, that's more fun to me. I just think it's more fun.
Now, when Rick Bassman had UPW as a development territory, I seem to recall seeing some documentaries where you came in as a promo coach. So I'm guessing you would have worked with some big stars over the years in wrestling, such as John Cena that was developed there and others. Any memories of Cena or any of the guys that came up through UPW?
Yeah, I distinctly remember John Cena. I had a class there where I was teaching guys how to get on the stick and cut promos. And John walked in one of my classes, and I seen him. He used to wrestle under the name Prototype, and he had like a flat top and fantastic physique. Anyways, I said, so show me what you got. And John just went into this spiel for about 30 seconds. And I said, John, go home, man. You could teach me. There's nothing I can show you. I mean, this guy was so talented and so gifted. I knew right then and there the guy's going to be a star. I could just tell. He was really, really talented.
As far as promo advice as a successful actor, for the professional wrestlers out there in general, advice for the wrestlers watching, what would you give?
You know what? Don't be afraid to screw up. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and laugh at yourself. For crying out loud, don't take yourself seriously, because this isn't a serious business. I mean, it is to a certain degree, but when you relax and you have fun, everybody watching you has fun. That's one thing I know for a fact. Even if you're playing a serious character, if the intent behind it is you're enjoying what you're doing, they're going to dig it. And if they dig it, then you put yourself over. That's my greatest advice to anybody. Don't take yourself seriously and have fun.
And for any actors watching this, do you have any advice as far as, well, two things I've had difficulty with are memorizing lines and also nerves for auditions. For instance, like sometimes you're driving 4 hours for an audition and the pressure is pretty high. You don't want to screw it up.
So I'll tell you a story about me. I was so crappy auditioning that I went and auditioned. I don't even remember what it was, but when these casting directors are seeing 40, 50 people a day, all they have time to do is throw your picture in a round file and say next. But if you have a casting director that goes out of their way to call your agent and say, this guy sucks, don't ever have him come back again, you know you were terrible. And that was me. And I remember my manager pulling me aside. He goes, Darren, you might be in the wrong business. And I said, listen, man, let me get over the stage fright. I said, I promise you. I said, once I get through this, I'm going to kill it. And he goes, well, all right, we'll give you another chance. And it took me a good 6 months because I had terrible stage fright. But you know what? You just don't quit. You power through it. You do well. I'm like you. I was terrible memorizing lines. So what I found was you get the gist of the idea of what it's about. And you remember the key things. And then you just let it rip from there. And the people that are watching you are going to see what you can do. And they're going to know at some point you'll memorize those lines. So that's what I always did. And that's what started booking me jobs right and left. But yeah, it took me a while. Took me a while to get over the stage fright, for sure.
Now, as far as the work you're doing now, you've mentioned several times in this, you're a Christian, you do a lot of positive work. You take care of, I guess, some, I don't know if they're called halfway houses, but people that are getting over addictions, I guess. You help manage houses like that. Could you explain that to us, what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I'm doing a couple of things. I'm actually getting back into the business again, but my life has taken a turn to where I'm doing a lot of drug and alcohol counseling. I actually have a podcast called The Issues of Life, where we talk to people about drug and alcohol addiction, and it's directly from a spiritual perspective. And I've got some of the most amazing doctors and therapists and counselors that come on my show and talk about different addictions and how they affect the brain and things like that. And what I'm doing now is I have a house where there's 8 guys, and it's called the Sober Living House. And each one of these guys is at this point clean and sober, and they will stay here for a period of time. We have AA meetings here. I encourage them to work on their spiritual lives, although I don't cram my faith on anybody's throat because that's not my place. And I just encourage people to, become a better version of themselves and beat this addiction. And man, Devin, it's one of the worst, most pervasive, ugly diseases, insidious diseases I've ever seen, because, a good 80% of these people, when they come through here, they leave and they're back drinking or doing drugs again. So it's something, the guys really have to work on. And even myself, I mean, I fell into an addiction. I shouldn't say I fell into addiction. I got into an addiction from one too many injuries and one too many losses in my life to painkillers. And for 2 years of my life, I was just lost. So I know what it's like for these guys. I know what it's like to come out of that. I know the hell of being addicted and the hell of recovery. But I really believe that, my place in this world is to help people and to, put love in their lives and encourage them. And that's what I believe I'm here for and what God put me on this earth for.